What's going on, guys? Dr. Andrew Fix back for another episode here on the Code. And we have another awesome interview, another one of these. We've done a few where it is a repeat interview with my friend Sarah Murphy. Sarah is the founder and owner of OMNI Neuro, which is a neurofeedback practice based here in Colorado. But I have strong suspicions that it's going to be much more than that as we continue into the future. Her journey in this realm of neurofeedback began after she experienced her own head injury and led her down the path of exploring brain training as a means of recovery. Sarah, thank you so much for coming back and joining me on the Code. How are you?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Could you do us a favor, Sarah, and just reintroduce yourself to all the listeners here on the Code and tell us more about you, and then we can get into how you got into neurofeedback and how you came to transition things to Omni.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, my name is Sarah Murphy, as Andrew just so politely spoke into that. I am the owner of OMNI Neuro. We are a neurofeedback and qEEG and DNA facility where we really hack the brain's electrical output to help build stamina in both mental health, but also to build resilience and longevity and mental wealth. So we do kind of pocket ourselves in the space of performance. So we work a lot with professional athletes, we work with youth athletes, we work with mompreneurs, we work with dads that just want to be the best dad that they possibly can be, and we work with high level executives to help them optimize for longevity purposes,
Mhm.
right? I found neurofeedback, as you mentioned, through an old head injury that I had. With that, I've been in this space for about 10 years, starting in the addiction and recovery space. Then I moved into more of an ADHD, autistic trauma response facility. And then I moved into one of our original locations, Resilience Code, which is a functional and integrative medical practice. There, we got to work a lot with our creme de la creme of clients, our peak performers. And in that space, we really learned how to understand how biologicals play a role in the brain's electrical output. So with that, it does allow us to have a really high efficacy rate in our practice because we tend to be able to lean people towards other optimization tools if it's not neurofeedback.
Mhm.
Um, with that, we do specialize in concussion recovery, peak performance, mild to medium anxious patterns, social anxiety, kiddos that are dealing with inability to have focus or attention. We work with mild depressive tendencies. We work with mood disorders, trauma responses, sleep issues, slowed processing speeds. These are all things that people oftentimes do not look at to don't look at to as their brain is like, oh gosh, maybe my brain just needs a little PT, right? They don't look at it as that. They
Mhm.
look at it as aging. And we're here to kind of share that that isn't actually the case.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Now, you guys, if you've listened to episodes of the Code before, like I said, this is a repeat conversation with Sarah. Is actually way back on episode 9. So if you want to hear that conversation, go back and tune into that episode as well. And on that one, I'm trying to remember some of the conversation, Sarah, that we had, but I know one of the taglines or phrases that I hear you say all the time is that we help take people from states of mental illness to mental health to mental wealth. And I think we should focus this conversation today on the back half or the later half of that, going from that place of mental health to mental wealth, like taking somebody who is performing, by all accounts, like pretty well, but they're still dealing with the constant stressors of life, the anxiety, the things like, or these feelings of like they're still not performing at a high enough level, even though to everyone else's perception they're performing quite well. But they want to do even better. But can you just talk for just a moment on before we jump to that, like what is exactly neurofeedback? How you go from this like brain scan and create a training protocol for somebody, and then just maybe touch on that going from states of mental illness to mental health.
Yeah, so when people come into our office, the first thing that they're going to experience is one, a discovery call, right? Are we the right fit for them? The second thing is going to be the qEEG. At our facility, we do an analysis on both the qEEG and the EEG. There's a difference between the two. EEGs can help us understand if there's any underlying concerns in their electrical output, right? Where qEEG is kind of a quantitative analysis, which allows us to compare you to other people, right? Your age, right? So it allows us to say, how are you doing in relation to how other people are doing, right?
Mm.
So in the case of peak performance, like oftentimes we want brains to be a little unique and a little elevated in certain areas in order to make them feel as though they are a little unique and different and optimizing in different ways. From the brain map, we have a brain map review. The brain map review is where we discuss the results of this electrical reading of the qEEG. Uh, with the brain map review, where we sit down, we kind of talk and we discuss what we see in the brain map, but then we also discuss what the client is experiencing. That's just as important as what we see, because sometimes what we see in a qEEG might raise an eyebrow to us and say, "Oh, is this a concern?" However, the person sitting across from us is like, "No, I don't actually deal with that at all." And we say, "Okay, well, maybe over time, this may become a problem." Right. So we need to start to hack this behavior and teach it flexibility so that it's not a challenge moving forward.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, in the space of peak performance, people have been using certain areas of their brains as a strength for years and years and years and years. And then they come to see us in their 50s and they're like, this used to be something I could just like knock out so quickly and it was my
Right.
strength. And then all of a sudden, it's not. Right. And we probably could have told them that this was going to be a problem or this was going to be a concern with their brain map because of rigid patterns and how they tend to, if you're not sleeping well, they'll get worse, right? And if you're not sleeping well, then those areas of the brain are going to get worse faster, right? So we've got to get the brain sleeping well so that these areas of the brain that are your strength now can continue to be your strength for longevity,
Mm.
right? So after the brain map and after we kind of discuss what we see, what the client experiences, and kind of meet them halfway and say, this is what we'd like to work on. What do you want to see change? Then we move into neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is the retraining of these electrical outputs, right? So we oftentimes refer to us as kind of the physical therapist of the brain, right? You oftentimes will have someone do a squat and they'll say, oh gosh, like my hamstrings, I can feel my hamstrings on the squat. And you're like, well, you shouldn't feel your hamstrings. You should feel more of your quads and your glutes, right? This is the same thing in the scope of neurofeedback. It's like, oh, like this, your focus and attention shouldn't go to wayside because you're processing more information, right? So it's the same thing. The posterior region of the brain is overacting or being overactive, and the front of the brain is being a little bit more rigid, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Got to teach these areas of the brain to work together and to fire appropriately. And that's what neurofeedback does. So when
Yeah.
someone comes into our office, they sit in this calm, cool environment. We put electrodes on their head, we put some earphones over their ears, and they just kick back and relax. We let the system, we let the software, we let the technology of neurofeedback retrain these aspects of the brain through your senses. We've learned how to do everything to date through senses, right? So it's important to understand that this isn't a super invasive practice. This is a
Yeah.
non-invasive practice that allows you to just kind of kick back, relax, and let your subconscious mind work out the kinks.
Yeah. Man, I love that. And I think, oh man, when did this come out? A year and a half ago or something? This Netflix special on quarterbacks and NFL players and whatnot. And I think that was one of the ways that I started to notice, and I know you and I briefly talked about this, like people in society becoming more aware of like what the heck is neurofeedback. They see Kirk Cousins in his car using a remote set, going through neurofeedback retraining sessions in advance of practice or whatnot, and doing this on like a daily or regular basis, just to try and get that extra 1% or 0.5% difference that's going to help him with his processing and things on the field. So, some of the things you mentioned a little bit ago were like types of people, mompreneurs or people like myself who are just trying to be super dad, and they're trying to crush it in their daily life, taking care of themselves. They're trying to crush it at work. They're trying to come home and crush it with their families and their kids. And then also these high performers, the athletes, no matter what age or grade they're in, or if they're professional, that are just looking for that little bit of an edge. So let's maybe unpack that. Let's talk to those mompreneurs and those super dads that are trying to be very successful in all the different facets of their life. Why would or how would they come to the place where they might make the decision that, man, neurofeedback is something that I should consider as a means to help make me more effective.
Um, well, let's talk about what everyone is doing to
Yeah,
try to be effective. And then we'll talk about how neurofeedback can really take place of all of
yeah, that
that.
sounds great.
What a lot of people are doing right now is, they're wearing the blue light blocking glasses. They are making sure to get sunlight first thing in the mornings and at nighttime. A lot of people are over listening to podcasts, trying to take in so much information. What are some other hacks? Eating clean. Obviously, you're always going to want to eat clean. Hydration, health
Saunas and
planning,
cold
saunas, cold
plunges.
tubs,
Yeah.
you name it, right? And we're all doing this to like push our mental resilience, which we love, right? And I think that those are all things that add value to our life for sure. However, if you get into a cold tub and the goal is to, just push yourself, right? And you're already someone that's pushing yourself every single day, right? You are living outside of your comfort zone, and the cold tub is just an extra thing that you're doing every day.
Hmm.
Does it have amazing like CNS system response like improvements, helps with immunity? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's like there's a lot faster and more effective and more long-term way to recircuit your brain if you're getting in that cold tub for recircuiting,
Yeah.
right? If you're getting in that cold tub because, I want to improve my sleep. Okay, well, do you lift weights? Okay, yes. Okay, that's probably increasing your testosterone to a level that's appropriate, and the cold tub might be overdoing it, right? Maybe what you need is actually a little more stillness in your life, right? And maybe that's why you're getting into that cold tub, which is fine too. Like I highly encourage cold tubs. I'm not saying don't do them, but I am saying if you're doing a cold tub and this and that and this and that and this and that, and you're noticing that you're still like waking up and wondering what else you can do to improve your mental
Hmm.
state, then neurofeedback is going to be something you're going to want to look at,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Because it's going to help you roll back the dial on all the things you're doing to maintain this certain mental resilience. When at the end of the day, it's like what I tell people is like neurofeedback allows for mental clarity, right? If you're wondering if you should be taking the supplement, or if you're wondering if you should be doing the cold tub 5 days or 7 days or 3 days or 2 days, or you're wondering if you should stay up late and work out or work out even though you're really, really tired and drained, right? Neurofeedback will allow your brain to connect to your body again to help you understand like what's best for you in that moment right then, right
Hmm.
there without the rumination, without the mental chatter, without the overthinking, right? Specifically, men, if we're talking in that scope of things, it's like men oftentimes they're like, oh, I don't have time for therapy. I don't have
Yeah.
time to sit down with a therapist and talk to them about my feelings, which already feels too much, right? We're here to encourage that, but at the end of the day, it's like if we can allow your brain to have more flexibility to be vulnerable with the person across the dinner table, the person that matters the most, then you're going to be accessing a form of therapy that is way stronger and way more long term than an hour appointment once a week,
Yeah.
right? So neurofeedback allows men to kind of sit here, check out, let their brain recircuit, build some neuroplasticity, unlock some rigid patterns so they can think about things a little bit differently, right? So mental clarity, mental curiosity is one of my favorite words that opens up, that happens with neurofeedback, right?
Hmm.
Like you stop thinking about things in such a rigid way and open up your mind to different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Which only helps in businesses, right? Often we've seen numerous CEOs come into our office, start doing neurofeedback, and their businesses 10x
Yeah.
within the next year, right? Just because it does, it opens up that clarity of like, oh, no, that's not going to work. I'm going to go here. And there's no questioning. There's no rigidity of thought around it. It's just that's where I'm going, right?
Hmm.
Done. With
Yeah.
momspreneurs, stay-at-home moms, like there's just an extreme amount of right? And that overwhelm becomes really, really daunting over time, right? Like it impacts our sleep. Women tend to report like headaches and migraines coming up around this time,
Hmm.
which obviously can be very hormonal, right? But we're here, the brain map specifically is here to say, hey, what is it, right? Where's this coming from? How is this going to help you maybe even shift that migraine from a 10 down to a 2 or 3, right? Is this impacting your whole day or is it impacting an hour of your life? Right. And then you can kind of get down to the nitty gritty on where it's coming from. right? But neurofeedback, if there's flexibility in the electrical output, then it does allow for your brain to overcome these challenges more often, whether it's overwhelm, stress management, mood disorders, emotional overwhelm, a trauma response, right? Like
Hmm.
oftentimes with moms, especially if they're at home all day, right? You come home and they just want to like be all on you and be like, oh my gosh, a human, an adult, like let's have
Yeah.
conversation, right? But that's what they need in that moment, but they need it because of the lack of flexibility,
Hmm.
right? So if they could have that pause button, be like, he needs to go on a walk, right? He needs to decompress from the day, right? And when he comes back, he's going to be better, right? And not feel as though that's an attachment or another state of overwhelm or resentment of, well, why isn't he helping me with the kids? He's home and he should have been home an hour ago, right? So there's just a lot more flexibility in the brain that happens that gives more patience, that gives more resilience, heightens mental clarity, reduces overwhelm, anxiousness, and then the resentment that can come from anxiousness, right?
Yeah.
So there's just so much to unpack there. But with like the male female tendency, like that's one of my favorite topics to talk about because, what is it, Mars and Venus? It's like we're two different humans living in the same home. And it's so important for us to open up these rigid patterns of being the sexes that we are so that we can actually coexist and have some homeostasis, especially in this busy, 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 like socially drawing and sensory drawing world that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the things that you just talked about, mental resilience, mental clarity, flexibility, neuroplasticity is a fun word, right? Our brain and our entire body is just so amazing in how it can continue to adapt and change to the stimuli that we provide it, whether we're talking about physically in the gym, whether we're talking about mentally in our brain changing. And I think all of these things, like anybody, when they hear that, would want those things, right? Like, why wouldn't we want to have that opportunity to better each of those little areas? And what you just mentioned, like, especially in today's busy, sensory, attention grabbing world, I think it's more important than ever. Like, it is so much harder now. This is something that, I deal with, right? Staying focused, staying in the moment, staying still, and not jumping from thing to thing to thing, because there is so much that's just constantly trying to grab our attention. There are notifications going off. Everything is so technology driven these days with the phones, with the computers, et cetera, et cetera. That just being present and having those moments with the people that you're trying to communicate with. And you mentioned like these high level CEOs coming in, improving their business by, um, as a result of going through some neurofeedback. I think, a big part of that is probably just improving their ability to communicate with people. And as a byproduct of that, boom, things just start to take off and elevate. So I think, I think all of that, obviously sounds amazing, and who wouldn't want those things? I want you to touch on real briefly. You mentioned how neurofeedback could be a complement to, but how it's very different than working with a psychotherapist. And I know that's obviously not your field, but you work with many people who are in that field. So how does neurofeedback kind of like collaborate with or combine with to improve the benefits of therapy that somebody may be participating in? And the reason I want to talk about that briefly is because I think over the past few years, we've seen a real uptick in the willingness for people to seek out therapy, mental therapy, talk therapy, psychotherapy, whatever word you want to use, over the past few years as our um, we all went through the pandemic. We're all went through this social isolation. Like people are starting to finally become aware of, wow, how important it is to make sure we're taking care of ourselves from a mental health standpoint. So how does neurofeedback and therapy sort of work together?
So, first of all, I love therapy. I think that certain individuals, it should be their go-to form of therapy. The brain map allows us to understand who those people are, right? So if we see a brain map come through and I'm like, oh, this person really needs to like outwardly process, right? Those are people that we would say, okay, during this process, we want you also seeing your therapist,
Hmm.
right? Where there's other people where we're like, okay, you're actually like doing pretty well. Like, how often do you meet with your therapist? Da, 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 da. Do you have a good relationship at home? Like, are you able to communicate challenges or your day with your partner or friend or family member and they're like, yeah, 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 and they're not necessarily outwardly processing individuals, then neurofeedback is going to be their go-to form
Hmm.
of training the brain. Okay. So the difference between the two is that one, neurofeedback is passive, right? So you're not sitting in a room talking about your feelings. We spend the first 10 minutes of a session coaching you through understanding how your brain is receiving neurofeedback. And then we ask very specific questions to understand what areas of the brain are firing and what areas of the brain are not firing in their experience of their world in the
Hmm.
past week, right? Or even potentially in the past, right? Where therapy tends to help people process through the past, right? That helps them understand, oh gosh, like, what was my childhood like? How did that impact me today? What was this past job like? How did that impact me today? What can I do better? Which is wonderful. However, there's a time and a place to, let go of the past and move forward.
Yeah.
So what I love about neurofeedback is it puts people in charge. It puts them back in control of their life after they've gone through a significant amount of therapy, right?
Hmm.
Now, would therapists love it if we train brains first and then go into therapy? Yes, because then they have less to process through, less to work through. The brain is more available to work
Hmm.
through things and cut through certain patterns in the brain. We love working with therapists and neurofeedback at the same time. And these are in cases of mental illness, right? If we're working in the case of mental health, then those people are typically working with coaches, right?
Yeah.
And coaches
Hmm.
allow them to make appropriate steps forward, right? Helping them understand, oh, you made this choice. Well, why did you make this choice instead of this choice? Because this choice would have, jumped you 10 steps forward, where the choice you made kind of keeps you safe, right? So coaches help push through that safe, that comfortable space to push them into more of this discomfort space to grow, right?
Hmm.
With that, that mental health case, we're always working with coaches to help understand like where do we need to meet this person? Where do we need to challenge them in their session? Whether that's through neurofeedback or through our 10 minutes of coaching we do prior to session. Then we go into the state of mental wealth. And mental wealth, people are typically like kind of working with coaches. They're usually working with some kind of executive coach, if I'm honest, like someone
Yeah.
that's really pushing them daily. At that point in the mental wealth space, they're probably working with a relationship coach. They're probably working on their love life. They're probably working on their spiritual connection. They're probably working on just how they're showing up day to day and optimization in their day. Which in that case, as far as therapy is concerned, it's really something that we encourage to do when you go through hard pockets of your life, right? So
Hmm.
if you're in a sandwich period of your life where you're taking care of your kids, but you're also taking care of your parents, like those are times where a therapy session are probably going to be more beneficial. And then neurofeedback comes into play to help the brain process through all of the therapy it's going through, but also how to move forward and how to not experience trauma from what they're experiencing in that moment in that day.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Just allow them to focus on the things that they need to focus on.
Yeah.
The point you made about people working with coaches is so true. And, from my, well, I would say former and current athletic life, I've worked with a lot of different coaches, whether that's football, wrestling, track, some team sports, some individual sports. Now I work more with fitness coaches, right? Personal trainers and whatnot, but also business coaches, like you mentioned, right? We have coaches that help us try to optimize and advance our business faster than what we would be able to do if we tried to just figure it all out on our own. And I think sometimes people have the tendency, especially people that are maybe performing pretty well or used to being good at things, sometimes they like feel bad about asking for help and they want to be able to figure it out all on their own, or they feel like they should be able to figure it out all on their own. But the truth of the matter is, one, you always want to be putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and get around people who have done the things that you're trying to do so that you can soak up information and knowledge from them so that they can help you achieve the things you're trying to achieve. And you don't have to do it all on your own. You'll be able to get to where you're going much faster if you don't try to do it all on your own and instead you do invest in coaches or in a tool like this, like neurofeedback. Let's talk about this from the athletic angle for a second, taking that, whether it's high school or college or professional, or even just like the adult non-professional athlete who is wanting to up level their performance. Speak to us about that and how neurofeedback could be an adjunct to the physical training that they're doing.
Mm, let's start with this. Okay, so this is my favorite thing because I've really been experiencing it a lot lately. And my favorite thing is like, how many times do you go to the gym and the entire time at the gym, you're going through the motions, you're doing the exercises, but you're in your head? Right? Like that is a lack of brain-body connection. And that lack of brain-body connection happens because of how fast our world moves, because of technology, because of this high resilience kind of David Goggins brain, right? It's saying be mentally strong and disconnect from your body, right? Our goal with neurofeedback is to reacquaint the brain and the body together to understand what it needs in real time. So with that, in the space of athletic performance, it's like if you're noticing that you're disengaging from your body, even when you're at the gym, that is a surefire sign that you need some neurofeedback, right? We've got you. Go ahead.
Sarah, give us an example of that. Like, what might somebody be feeling or thinking or experiencing if they're at the gym or wherever training and they're disengaging from their body?
Okay. So, perfect. One example is you have music on or a podcast, right?
Hmm.
And you go through your workout and you finish and you don't even know what you were listening to.
Mm,
Okay. Another example is, you finish your workout, say you did it at 5 a.m. and at 3 o'clock, you can't even remember what you worked out.
mm,
Right. Another example is leaving the gym and not feeling like that shaky leg or not feeling like you worked out, right? That means you're literally just going through the motion. You're not increasing the weight every single set, right? And you're not engaging enough to understand that there's maybe an injury starting to happen,
mm.
right? This is something we see in athletes all the time, especially athletes that have been in the space for a really, really long time,
Yeah.
is that they either one, prioritize their body and they have no connection to their brain, or the other way around, right? And they're so mentally strong, and this is usually quarterbacks, that they don't have that connection to their body,
Mm,
right? And what can happen there over time is a wear and tear of a muscle
yeah.
without understanding that that wear and tear is happening, right?
Sure.
If you're seeing your massage therapist and they say to you, "Oh my gosh, like you're really tight here," and you say, "Really?" Right? These are signs that there is a disconnect from the brain and the body, right? Andrew, I'm sure you've seen it time and time again where someone comes in and they're squatting and they're leaning to the left and they're like, "No, I'm not." Da, da, da.
Oh
And you
yeah.
show them and you're like, "Yes, you are." And they're like, "Oh, well, I guess." Right. And then they need personal training with you guys to address it because they're so disconnected.
Yeah.
And so the majority of the sessions are really about you guys teaching them how to reconnect to that left hip that's dropping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that is a sign that there's a brain-body connection that's lacking, and it's likely due to hyperactivity or underactivity in certain sites of the brain.
Hmm.
I had a brain map review yesterday with a high peak performer. She was 250 pounds, dropped down to 170. She's happy. She's a very tall woman. And she was like, "I'm doing great. I'm playing tennis with friends, but my doctor wants me lifting weights." And
Yeah.
so we're looking at our map, and I'm like, "Okay, it's underactive in your sensory lobe. So your brain isn't craving weights. It's
Mm,
not craving that connection, right?" So I was like, "We just need to wake this area of the brain up to get you to enjoy that aspect of life again."
interesting. Yeah.
Right. So with that, she's going to come through. She's going to do about 10 sessions. We're going to wake these areas of the brain up. We're also going to, in conjunction, make sure that she has a personal training session right after neurofeedback to make sure that she's teaching the brain that that's what we're trying to encourage it, right?
Hmm.
So we're in training the brain as well as retraining the brain,
Yeah.
right? So to answer your question, if you're noticing that you are so just disconnected, right? If you're noticing that you're not getting results from your workout, if you're not noticing that you're not pushing yourself as hard as you used to, if you're noticing that it's really hard to do that, it's really difficult for me to get my heart rate over 150, like it just doesn't feel good to me, right? That's a brain-body connection that we need to help your brain get reacquainted with. And over time, as we get older, this is very, very natural. We have life to take care of. We have, 40-hour work weeks, which are way more than that these days. Uh,
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
kids to take care of. We have spouses to hold space for, right? So as we get older, it does tend to be a little bit more difficult to put ourselves first. But I guarantee you, if you put your brain first, the rest is going to follow suit.
Hmm.
Um, in the space of athletics, like the injury stuff is what we see, and I had one player, he has been with me for 6 years now. He had an Achilles tear, he had a right bicep tear, he had a right shoulder sprain. And so for the first, he had 2 years in the NFL where he played uninjured. His brother died.
Mm.
And then year after year after year, he experienced injuries, right? Started neurofeedback on year 7 in the league, and he is now on year 11, no injury,
Mm.
right? So it's almost on a monthly basis that he texts me, and he's like, I don't know what I would do without this, right? Like it keeps me out of fear-based thinking. It keeps me out of this anxiousness that I feel from a loss, right? While, he does have some trauma, and trauma isn't something we tend to work on with athletes as they go through the space of professional sports because
Yeah,
it does keep them the edge. It's like what was it, Kobe Bryant that had the alter ego? That he used when he got on the court, right? And
right.
most athletes have that, right? And if they don't, we almost encourage them to create it, right? And so trauma is that for them, right? It allows them to have this, like, I need to prove something on this field right now, right? So we oftentimes don't really train the trauma, but we'll train the response of the trauma. Right.
Hmm.
And then once they're done playing or once they're retired, then that's when we really start to go into more of the trauma fields to allow them to release that ego that
Yeah.
came that trauma response.
Yeah, to help them sort of like reintegrate and perform well in the context of daily life.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I think a lot of high level athletes have something like that, whether it was trauma or whether it's that alter ego or something that is just a little bit, I don't want to say off, just a little bit unique or different about them. And that's
Mhm.
probably some of what has helped them reach this unique or different level in their performance that the vast majority of us don't reach that
Mhm.
peak. So you have to have or do something out of the ordinary to be out of the ordinary. So,
Absolutely.
um, yeah, I think that was so interesting in the story about that gentleman who's been playing in the NFL for a little over a decade, and kind of changing his injury history and trajectory. I mean, that's amazing. And even coming back from injuries like that is amazing in and of itself, especially an Achilles injury in a high level sport like that. Pretty hard to come back from and perform at a high level anyways, no matter who you are. So the one thing I want you to touch on before we wrap up is so many people I talk to feel this. You mentioned work weeks being more than 40 hours and this and that. We all have other responsibilities in our day, whether it's taking care of our family, putting food on the table, etc., keeping the house clean. Is people tend to get bogged down by all of the little decisions that they have to make in the day, right? They've got to make decisions at work. They're getting people asking questions to them. They need to make decisions at home. They need to figure out what are we going to have for dinner? Oh, when am I going to book these flights for this upcoming trip? Oh, which flight should I pick? Um, how does neurofeedback help the person navigate those never-ending waterfall of just little decisions that they have to make that tend to lead to the overwhelm that you sort of mentioned earlier that so many of us are feeling?
So it's natural for individuals as we age for our processing speed to slow down. Okay. Very normal. For men, I think it starts to slow down around 33. For women, it's around 38.
Oh, good. So
Um,
I'm slowing down.
yeah, you are.
Closing in on 35.
We'll
We're
see you
slowing
next
down.
week. So our goal with neurofeedback is to shift that, right? To allow people, if your processing speed starts to slow down to 35, to allow it to continue to
Mhm.
maintain or increase, right? Um, That being said, I have been able to increase my processing speed. I started at 8.6. I am now at a 9.9. Norm for my age is around a 9.5 to 10.2, right? So with that, we want to make sure that processing speeds increase. Why? Because that helps you intake information faster and it allows you to shoot that information to the area of the brain that makes decisions faster. And when that area of the brain that makes decisions is faster and more flexible, we can then hold more, right?
Mm,
So if our processing speed is dialed in and we're doing what we need to be doing, it can send that information to the area of the brain that's going to make decisions better, faster. And that's where the mental clarity comes in, right?
hmm.
Often after session 5 or 8, people are coming in and they're like, oh my gosh, my to-do list doesn't feel so heavy, right? And I even had somebody yesterday, they were like, oh, I'm not even writing down my to-do list. My brain just like knows what it's supposed to do and it naturally and organically moves through it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's still write down that to-do list.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like I noticed that personally, that was probably my one of my bigger changes was that I was waking up and I was just dialed in. I was ready. If somebody asked me what I wanted to eat tonight, I could tell them, right? Instead of saying, I don't know, what do you want to eat? Uh, so
Yep.
it absolutely helps with that decision fatigue. And it is kind of a grandiose approach in the brain when it comes to decision fatigue and mental clarity. We have to train all aspects of the brain. It's not just one area, right? While the prefrontal cortex plays a huge role in that executive function, multitasking, and decision making, so does the sensory lobe, right? And the sensory lobe plays a huge role in our ability to move, right? If somebody cuts you off in traffic, how quickly can you react? That's a decision that your brain has to make, right? So you have to take into consideration both motor movement as well as executive function
Yeah.
and choices, right? So we have to get the entire brain kind of working for each other, right? It's like if you are trying to build up some quad muscles, like and their squat form is lackluster, you have to build up their lats and you have to build up their core. Right.
Hmm.
So it's no different than that. We really have to make sure the entire brain is optimized in order to encourage better, healthier decision making.
Yep.
That's another thing that we notice, not only with peak performers, moms, dads, decision making, burnout, but also something we work with athletes all the time, right? They hesitate. They're used to making a decision to go to the right where this new play comes in and they have to cut to the left, right? That's
Hmm.
hard for their brain, right? So we need to teach it that it can do both things just as easily.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And you started to mention this. You kind of were talking about like, hey, someone might notice this on session 5 or on session 8. Commonly when someone comes into physical therapy, right? They come into our office at Physio room, we go through an assessment and we analyze how their body's moving, not just the site where they're having symptoms, but the whole thing. And we recommend to them and start to craft a treatment plan or a plan of care depending on how acute their symptoms are. If they're very acute and it's a new, fresh injury, we might tell this person, hey, I think it would be most optimal for you to come in twice a week for the first 2 weeks so that we can really get these symptoms under control. And then as you start feeling better, we're going to scale you back to once a week where we really can work on the root cause issues that are leading to why you have this knee pain or shoulder pain in the first place. And then as you continue to feel better and better, we will scale the frequency with which we see you back, right? And typically we're telling people, if they're coming in with an acute ache or pain, we expect this to be noticeably different, significantly better within the first month that you're here. And then we're really going to start to work on the root cause things in the performance. And we go through a process that we call reset, restore, reload when we talk about that. Versus like if someone else was coming in, maybe their symptoms aren't quite as acute. Maybe we're not seeing them twice a week. Maybe we're seeing them once a week, or maybe we're starting every other week. I know it's very different and unique to the individual, but to give people listening to this an idea, like what does it commonly look like when you're coming into neurofeedback and you go through that initial discovery call and brain mapping session? You guys then analyze that and talk about what the plan should look like. What is a common thing that someone can expect?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing with us is that we do a multimodality approach to neurofeedback, which does allow us to get people in and out of neurofeedback faster. Why? Because we're reducing inflammation in the brain with photobiomodulation first. Then we're doing neurofeedback, and then we're doing a system called AVE, which is audiovisual entrainment. So we are taking a three-prong approach to encourage change in the brain. So it's not just coming in, chatting for 10 minutes, and then we're training your brain, right? This does allow us to get better, faster results. So where most clinics would quote anywhere from 40 to 80 sessions, we're
Mm,
really on that kind of 30 to 50 mark, right?
got it.
If you're coming in for peak performance, we're going to get you there by 30. We really, really are, if not sooner. We do have a lot of people that come in and they're like, oh gosh, I just love this and I want to keep doing it, which is awesome, right? We will encourage you to take breaks when it's necessary. However, we do have a lot of people that are like, I just want to come in every other week just to like maintain because I just feel so good on this, right?
Yeah,
And that's great because this is exercise for the brain, right? So we shouldn't treat it as anything but, right? Is there an aspect of physical therapy where we're having to rehab the brain first? Absolutely. But once we get you through the rehab space, more into the performance space, that's when it's like, hey, like you can come in when you feel like you need it. If you're going through a hard time in life, pop in for a couple sessions. If life is easy breezy, don't. Like that's
yeah,
totally fine. Um, so that 30 to 50 mark is really what we encourage people to understand about us is that
yeah.
we're gonna really try our best to get you in and out in that scope in that time period. My athletes, they train remotely, so we do have we have a remote system that allows us to train anywhere in the world. That system, we do tend to see people kind of do about 6 months of training with these performers. We will have performance protocols, right? So they will do them right before a game, right? Instead of doing a pre-workout or their other ritual, they'll do a 15-minute session just to knock their brain up, allow them to get into flow state faster,
Hmm.
and that alone will allow them to perform better, right? Reduce
Yeah,
injury. So that is a whole different kind of caliber of training, if you will.
yeah, yeah. I think that's great. Just sort of giving everybody an idea of like, what to expect. And then I guess my final question on that is, from the physical standpoint, we know if somebody puts in the work, the training to improve their ability to squat the bar, then they're squatting 135, then they're 225, and they work their way up to say, oh, I can squat 315 pounds and I can do that for a set number of reps. We know if they don't continue to train, they're not going to continue to have the physical ability to do that. And if you put in the training and time to get to a place, you're going to have to maintain that in some capacity if you want to still be able to do that. How does that work with neurofeedback in terms of like if somebody goes through 30 sessions, they improve their ability, their processing speed, they're feeling so much better. How does that look from like a ongoing maintenance standpoint?
Yeah, the only time that that's true that someone's going to need to be doing a ton of maintenance is if there's an underlying issue.
Yeah,
So for me, I have an old head injury. So I do a session once a month just for maintenance. Okay.
got it.
If someone comes in and they have the MTHFR gene mutation and they're chronically exposed to toxins that they're not detoxing, then they're someone we're going to probably put on a maintenance plan. If someone is chronically in high stress environments or in a marriage that's very toxic, like we're going to put them on a maintenance session.
Yeah,
If they're chronically exposed to stressors, right? However, in a healthy individual like you, like if we knocked out 30 sessions with you, you probably really wouldn't need neurofeedback unless life's kind of stressful right now. I'm going to pop in for one or two
yep,
over the course of 6 months,
got it.
right? Which is one of the beautiful things of neurofeedback is the
Yeah.
longevity of
Yeah,
it.
definitely. Yeah, I love that. Well, I think you guys that are listening to this, if you're local here in the Denver area, my gosh, why wouldn't you reach out to Sarah and her team to try to find a time to go through an analysis, a brain map, and some neurofeedback training yourself? And if you're somewhere else, I mean, still reach out to Sarah. Sarah, where can people find you guys? What sort of contact information can we include here in the show so that people know how to get in touch with you at Omni?
Great. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. Both profiles are OMNI Neurofeedback. You can also find us online at omninfb.com. If you are super curious and you just want to jump right in and have a one-on-one call with me, you can get a hold of us at sarah@omninfb.com, and we'll be sure to respond and get you on our schedule.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. You guys, so thankful that Sarah joined us. Thank you. I hope both Sarah and I tend to have a meeting every Friday morning. That meeting didn't happen today, so we were able to use this same time to knock out this podcast episode. So I really appreciate you carving out the time to chat with us today on the code, Sarah.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I really
Abs-
appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You guys that tuned in to listen to us on the code, whether it's your first time or whether you've been here for 170 plus episodes, can't thank you guys enough. keep the comments, keep the questions coming so that we can get podcast episodes, whether they're solo or interview, out there on those things. We want to talk about the things that you have questions on and want to learn about. And if you did make it to the end of this episode, you can imagine that reviews go a really, really long way on this podcast. So if you've never left a review, or if you think this podcast could be shared with someone who really needs to hear it, and encourage them to leave a review as well, that would be so, so appreciated. So thank you guys so much in advance. And we hope to catch you on the next episode of The Code. We'll see you later. Bye bye.